Alrighty, it seems like we're seeing some repercussions already for the Republicans' disaster this past Tuesday. And for those of you who are tired of hearing about the election, because, in normal times I don't cover politics day to day, but around election time I do talk about it a lot because they are they do have impacts. And one of those impacts might be the fall of Mitch McConnell. Finally, we are seeing, I think, because the Republican majority in the House will be so slim, and potentially, if the Republicans might not even have a majority in the Senate, it might even be back to 50-50. This has put the Republican leadership in Congress in a rather weak position. In the House, if Kevin McCarthy wants to be Speaker of the House, he's going to need every single Republican vote. And if only a couple people defect, Kevin McCarthy will not be the Speaker of the House. The Republicans in the House can do, and are talking about, at least Matt Gaetz and a couple others seem very interested, Chip Roy, in doing what AOC and the squad were too afraid to do to Nancy Pelosi during the whole force the vote debacle, in which Jimmy Dore and others were pushing because the Democrats had such a slim majority. Nancy Pelosi was very vulnerable. It would only take a few Democrats to defect in order for her to lose her speakership bid. And so therefore she would have to make a deal with those Democrats in order to secure their votes, in order for Nancy Pelosi to become Speaker. Now, the squad decided not to do that. They did not cut a deal with Nancy. They just voted for her without hesitation. Hopefully, Republicans do not do the same. Now, in the Senate, there's even rumblings about a coup against Mitch McConnell. And again, this could be the internal Republican politics up there. They could be knifing each other because this was such a big failure. And there are a lot of people, I'm sure, who are ready to blame Cocaine Mitch. Chief among them, Rick Scott, senator from Florida, former governor of Florida, and the current chair of the National Republican Senatorial Committee. But frankly, I don't feel that Rick Scott is in the best place to criticize McConnell, since the NRSC, the National Republican Senatorial Committee, is in charge of distributing funds to Republican Senate candidates. So I'm not exactly sure. I should have looked into the details of the money that McConnell was blamed for moving around and giving to the wrong candidates, and how big of a role he had vis-a-vis or relative to Rick Scott's. But either way, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. This is just leverage. It's not about whether Rick Scott and these other people have a good logical case. It's that this is his chance to move in and strike. And so Marco Rubio, the other senator from Florida, the senior senator from Florida, he came out and has issued, I shouldn't say issued a statement. He tweeted that the Republican leadership vote in the Senate should be postponed. It's supposed to take place next week after the election. But since we don't know the results of the election in Georgia, little Marco wants to postpone it. And obviously, who does this advantage? It advantages somebody who doesn't want Mitch McConnell, or who wants to take Mitch McConnell's job. The very idea of postponing the vote, that the vote even matters, is a tacit endorsement of running someone against McConnell, because usually this is a formality. McConnell has been the leader for so long, everyone just understands, oh yeah, we have this procedure, and and then McConnell becomes the leader again, and it always happens, and there's never any serious challengers or anything like that. But what Rubio's contemplating here is the idea of a serious challenger, and saying, no, we need to wait for to see if there needs to be a challenge here, and we need to wait for that challenger to emerge, and we need to, I think in his words, make sure that whoever we pick to be the leader is someone who is going to stand up for the interests of our voters. And very clearly, if you read Rubio's tweet, he's describing someone very different than Mitch McConnell. Say what you will about Mitch McConnell, I don't think even his staunchest defenders will shill for him, so hard that they say that he, has the interests of working Americans at heart. He doesn't. even his staunchest defenders understand that. What they say is that, oh, well, Mitch is good at working the system. He can get certain things done. He's a skilled parliamentarian. Those are the attributes that they give to Mitch. They don't say that Mitch cares about the little guy. Nobody thinks that Mitch McConnell cares about the little guy. So Rick Scott wants to be the next Senate Majority Leader, or at least the Republican leader if it's a 50-50 Senate again. This much is clear. Donald Trump has already endorsed Rick Scott to be the Majority Leader. It's kind of funny, you can tell everyone's talking about this behind the scenes, and Trump just, doesn't keep his mouth shut, so he says it in public, which I appreciate about Trump. It's kind of like when he talked about how great the arms deals are going to be with Saudi Arabia. That's something everybody knows goes on, but you don't say it out loud. But yeah, Trump admitted, hey, Rick Scott is trying to overthrow Mitch McConnell, and I want to help him out. Of course, Trump could have overthrown Mitch McConnell back in 2020 had he not endorsed McConnell for re-election. He could have primaried McConnell very easily in the state of Kentucky, and Mitch McConnell would be history. It is Donald Trump who saved Mitch McConnell. So the question now is, who else is going to come forward, or at least maybe behind the scenes come forward to Rubio now that he's thrown this trial balloon out there, clearly on behalf of Rick Scott, his fellow Florida senator. And who else is going to take the bait? Who else in the Senate is going to stab Caesar in the back? Now, with all that said, if somehow, let's say the Republicans retake the majority, they end up with 51 or 52 seats, which is their best case scenario. They can't get 53 at this point, but if everything goes well for them from here, which that's a big if. I mean, the Republicans could end all this at 49-51 in favor of the Democrats. The Democrats could actually retake the majority in the supposed red tsunami year. That's how bad the Republicans fucked this up, because they could fortify their way into winning Nevada and Arizona, and then Georgia in the runoff could go to Warnock just like it did last time. Now, some people are taking solace, and I'll get back to McConnell in a minute, but I want to just touch on these three races. Some people are taking solace in the fact that, historically speaking, the usual thing is that if you force an incumbent senator in the state of Georgia to a runoff, they usually will then lose the runoff. The exception being 2008, which kind of makes sense because Obama was on the ballot, so you had a lot of black voters energized, go out and vote for Obama, and they just barely pushed the Republican senator below 50%. And then when the runoff came, a lot of those same, pro-Obama, black voters, Obama wasn't on the ballot, they didn't show up, and so the Republican, was able to win the runoff. But this time, we've seen since 2020 a lot of historic precedents, a lot of like this shattered. Bellwether counties, bellwether states, just rendered meaningless. Hell, the Republicans currently are like 6 million votes ahead in the national popular vote, and yet they will only barely win the Senate, barely win the House and potentially lose the Senate. Republicans never win the popular vote, even when it's good years for them. But they did it this time. It's just that those votes apparently were in all the wrong places. The red areas got redder, the blue areas got bluer. Same thing I said before. And so, yes, the red vote did increase by more than the blue vote. But again, it was in areas that I guess they already were going to win. That's all we're left to... I mean, do I buy any of this 100%? No, I don't. Clearly, if you look at Maricopa County, this country does not have secure elections everywhere. I think that certain elections are more secure than others. But it certainly looks to me like there's a lot of fortification going on in Arizona, and to maybe a lesser extent in Nevada, or at least a less public extent. I mean, the gaslighting is off the charts with people going, "Oh no, this is just how elections work in Arizona. This is the way things have always been." Every year we're waiting 2 weeks to get the people in Arizona to count the last few thousand votes. They count hundreds of thousands of votes on election night, and then they just stop as soon as it looks like the Republicans about to take the lead, and then they count very, very slowly or not at all for the rest of the week. And we're told maybe next week we'll get the results if you're lucky. So yeah, when things go that way, I can definitely see how the Democrats could end up 51-49 in the Senate, as unimaginable that was, a week ago. But leaving that aside, going back to McConnell, does anything really change to get rid of McConnell, replace him with Rick Scott, who Rick Scott is not great to begin with? I mean, yes and no. It's not exactly a lateral move, but you remember when they went from John Boehner, who was so terrible, to Paul Ryan? Did things get any better under Paul Ryan as Speaker of the House? No. Now people remember Paul Ryan probably even less fondly than John Boehner. Paul Ryan is probably more reviled by the base, when back then, he was seen as like the compromise guy that, the base loved and that the establishment could tolerate. I think that Rick Scott, if he were to become the majority leader, enters that position with a less conservative reputation, less popularity amongst the Republican base than even Paul Ryan did. Now, maybe you could say Paul Ryan didn't have a lot of base support after being Mitt Romney's vice president. That's also why he was picked, by the way. He was picked to be, like the raw meat to the conservative base, the same way that Palin was picked in 2008 to be John McCain's running mate. Rick Scott has never been that guy. He's never portrayed himself as that guy. He's never been a Republican firebrand by any means. But with that said, it's hard to be worse than McConnell, because McConnell is not only does he have bad intentions, like his goals are outright wrong. They are against you. If Mitch McConnell is winning, you're losing, essentially. Rick Scott is not as nefarious, but he's also, I think, at this point in his life, more politically intelligent than McConnell. McConnell's an old man, and I think that he is about as set in his ways as you can get, and he doesn't give a damn if the base likes it or not. Whereas Scott may be a little more politically shrewd. That doesn't mean that he will have your best interests at heart, no. But it will mean that he understands that he can't piss in your face. Now, all in all, is this going to change anything in America? No. Things getting better? No. I maintain that I think that this election has only strengthened the case for national divorce. When you look at how the swings, how there is no real national swing anymore. You don't see the entire country swing one direction or another, and frankly, it seems like we don't even have swing states at this point, because the new swing states, Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, did they swing much from 2020 when this was supposed to be a big Republican year? No. Pennsylvania and Michigan and Wisconsin, well, Pennsylvania and Michigan, let's look at those. Those are supposed to be new swing states too after 16. They seem to be much more clearly just blue states again. 16 looks like an anomaly. Wisconsin was supposed to be becoming more of a swing state, and Ron Johnson, who was an entrenched incumbent, popular high name ID, running against a guy who really was like anti-Wisconsin to his core. He's not a good candidate for that. Ron Johnson still could barely hold on. He won by a couple points, and that's in a really good year for Republicans. And then the Republican candidate for governor running against the lockdown guy, I mean, he just got trounced. And again, this isn't a pro-Republican year, so can you even really call Wisconsin a swing state? I mean, really, we are breaking down into red states and blue states, and they're each pretty deep. North Carolina is pretty close still, but North Carolina still, at the end of the day, normally comes home to the GOP. Yeah, they have a Democrat governor right now, but kind of an anomaly. I think that the voter registrations have been shifting in North Carolina. Your ancestral Democrats are, I think, less inclined than ever to vote for a Democratic state, for like a governor type thing, because some people who wouldn't vote for a Democrat senator might vote for a Democrat governor. That's how this guy, what is his name? Is it Roy Cooper is the Democrat, or was that the Republican before him? Anyway, the current governor, that's how he got in. He didn't get people like to come over, to the Democratic side entirely, because North Carolina still sends Republican senators to Washington. And there was some talk about New Mexico. Maybe New Mexico would be closer. That didn't happen. So as far as I'm concerned, the polarization is baked in. That's not going to change. And it's probably for the better, because it'll get people to give up on this dream, on this fantasy of salvation through control of Congress and the White House. You know, we had the right had that after 9/11. The right had that under Trump the first 2 years. And ultimately, what do they get out of it? They got some stupid wars, and they also got Medicare Part D, I think, although maybe that was back when it was Democratic Congress by then. And then what happened under Trump? I guess we got rid of the individual mandate for Obamacare. You know, very minor victory. I mean, that is below the bare minimum that you would have expected. And tax cuts. So I will reiterate what I said yesterday. What the right in this country needs to focus on is on strengthening themselves at home. They need their states to move to the right. Because Washington is lost. You need to give up on that. I mean, sure, still send people there, try and hold the line to a certain extent. Gridlock in Congress is the best you can hope for. And then make changes at the state level that will structurally move your state to the right, like what's been done here in Florida. I think that Texas has some work that they need to do on that. Certainly, you know, your Alabamas, your Mississippis, your Tennessees, your Kentuckys, they all need to do that. You need each of these states. There's no excuse, as I said yesterday, for not having a total rock star in there. That will energize people. It'll give you a reason it'll give people a reason to vote, and it'll also give the left a reason to stay the hell out of your state or even leave it. And if you do that, this polarization will increase in a good way, and the states will naturally break apart all on their own. And you don't need articles of secession. I think Arizona is going to be a pivotal battleground moving forward with Lake. She is the first of this new wave after DeSantis that will look at his model and say, you know what, we can turn a swing state into a deep red state in 4 years, and that's how you do it. Really, it was only in the last 2 years. I mean, DeSantis was not making a lot of waves before the Wu flu. And actually, I mean, before then, he had really high approval ratings anyway, much higher than usual. So, I mean, you could make the case that maybe DeSantis was always this popular. But before the Wu flu, DeSantis was not considered a strict, like, you know, crazy partisan. He was considered to be somebody who, like, balanced both sides and was, you know, and Democrats could think of as reasonable and that sort of thing. And it's not that he was doing, like, moderate squishy things. It was just that was his, I guess, his demeanor. But I think it takes a strong personality and a strong leader like somebody like Lake or DeSantis to pull this off. And these people exist in every state. They just have to step forward, they have to be well-funded, and they have to be put in the right place. And if they create a culture of leadership like this in the red states, then it doesn't matter what happens in Washington. They will be strong enough on their own to fight this off. So, with that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow.